Buckle up, folks. We've booked a one-way trip to the Bone Zone. Hello, folks. Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU, here for another Legacy video. And Sean gave me a bunch of dealer's choice donation deck lists, and I wanted to use them to experiment with Emperor of Bones. This is a card that has seen a little bit of Legacy play, but maybe not as much as it deserves. So, 2/2 Skeleton Noble. At the beginning of combat on your turn, exile up to one target card from a graveyard. So it's kind of like a Scavenging Ooze that you get a free activation of every turn. That's nice. It has Adapt 2, meaning if it doesn't have counters on it, I can put 2+1/+1 counters on it. And whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Emperor of Bones, put a creature card exiled with it onto the battlefield under your control with a Finality counter on it. That means that if it leaves play, it goes to exile. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So, how in theory this card works is you exile something, you adapt 2, you put that something into play, you get an attack step with it, get whatever ETB triggers it has, and then you move on with your life, exiling that creature. Now, notably, this card says, whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Emperor of Bones, it doesn't have to be from the adaptability, which led me to today's deck idea. This is one that I've brewed myself. I brewed it over my lunch hour today. We'll see whether or not it's good. It's certainly not polished. So here's what we're cooking with. My general idea was to use Emperor of Bones alongside Bristly Bill Spine Sower, so that we get an additional way to put +1/+1 counters on our Emperor of Bones other than just the adapt ability. And so I want ways to get large creatures into the graveyard. We're going to accomplish that with Sai, Entomb, and Troll of Khazad-dûm, although we are also going to play one generous Ent here just to up the density of creatures going to our graveyard. And this will be the final video that I hopefully ever record with Grief on this channel. This will release on Thursday. Grief hopefully will have been banned on Monday, and I don't have to eat my words. For the remainder of this deck list, I wanted just a little bit more in terms of +1/+1 counters, and so I went to Innkeeper's Talent. This is a card similar to something like Luminarch Aspirant, which has seen both Legacy and Vintage play, as well as play in other formats. So, like Aspirant, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This is going to be a little bit harder to remove on average than a creature like Luminarch Aspirant, and it also becomes a mana sink, allowing your permanents with counters to get Ward 1, and ultimately sort of a doubling season effect for your +1/+1 counters if you dump a total of 2, 3, plus another 4, a total of 7 mana. Which is kind of cool. I don't really know that we'll ever level this up to 3, but it's nice to have that option. So we're almost like a mono black deck here, even though we do have green mana. We are very much tilting the needle towards a mono black aggro deck list with a Reanimator package. Now, I think Psychic Frog could fit into this deck list. Conceptually, I think there's a lot going on there. When I started trying to add blue into the build, I was just having trouble finding enough slots. Because if you're in blue, presumably you want enough blue spells for Force of Will to make sense and Force of Negation to make sense. You want some number of cantrips. And as we've seen a couple of times on this channel, the Psychic Frog that is supported by counterspells is stronger than the Psychic Frog that does not have counterspells. And so I don't think I want to do that yet again. We've learned that lesson. 21 lands might be cutting it a little close. I have 5 cantrips that are always going to get me a land, and my curve, practically speaking, stops at 2, although I am happy to get more land drops beyond that. We'll try it out and see how it goes. As far as the sideboard goes, I think Fairy is particularly cute. You can Fairy, discard things, nuke some things from graveyard, and then Emperor of Bones your Fairy for a few points of damage later on in the matchup. Barrogoyf is another sort of engine that works well with some of the Emperor of Bones type stuff. And now that I'm saying this out loud, maybe that should be in the main deck over Springheart and Entoko. Raise my curve slightly. Yeah, that's fine. Let's go bam, bam. Do I now need the 20-second land? All right, Abrupt Decay is going to the sideboard. Let's play one more land. Let's get like one more. Probably just be a basic swamp, honestly. Yeah, let's add one more basic swamp into the mix and run out with one Inquisition in the sideboard. Perfect deck building. Now, as far as the sideboard goes, I think since I have multiple endgame mana sinks in this deck list, I don't really want to be a wasteland deck in game 1. I think I want to have the option to wasteland versus something like Eldrazi, so I'm going to put those into the sideboard where they might replace some spells in the post-sideboard game. But yeah, let's send off Grief with a bang. Let's try to go to the Bone Zone with Emperor of Bones. And should you need your copies of this card, please consider checking out my sponsor, TOAMagic.com. That's Tales of Adventure. They have treated me very well, and they treat their customers well. You always get free shipping online, and promo code ThrabenU will save you 5% on your order on top of that. Let's battle. My deck is so incredibly strong that my opponent, before even resolving their mulligans, was like, oh, fuck, I can't win, and conceded. Okay, our opponent has mulligan to 5 here. Assuming that I get a turn, I do have a relatively large amount of disruption here. So, let's do the thing that they're going to ban in Legacy. Let's grief people. What's going on over there, friend? Well, now, important distinction here. Shallow graveyard, your graveyard. Reanimate any graveyard. We'll be taking our opponent's Reanimate here. But some bad things can happen. Our opponent, in theory, can end of turn, Otherworldly Gaze, put a creature into their graveyard, and then Shallow Grave and attack with it. We're trying to hope for the best here, because I don't want to get griefed on their turn, because if I lose this Animate Dead, I don't have anything left that's reasonable for this game of Magic, despite being up 2 cards on my opponent. Okay, fantastic. We are just seeing a land hit the graveyard here. Now, my opponent did top 2 cards, though, so we do have to keep in mind that bad things can happen still. We're just going to pick up a basic swamp, play games on basics here for a little while, and put a clock into play. Is Grief better than Troll? Because Grief takes a Shallow Grave. And I can Grief again in 2 turns. Oh, that's gone. I don't know, maybe I need to take the Troll out of my graveyard so my opponent doesn't get the Troll. Otherworldly Gaze can just be flashed back. Let's try to take that Shallow Grave. If I get the first attack step, this is still probably fine. This is a small clock as is. Ooh, it's an Entomb. Well, I am going to take your reanimation spell. Notably, my opponent did not respond with Entomb, which they had the opportunity to do. And that means that they wanted to leave it in hand so that I could make the mistake of taking the Entomb rather than the Shallow Grave. Shallow Grave is valuable with this card remaining in graveyard. Notice how my opponent is going to just be mana efficient here. Archon of Cruelty. Okay. Now that was all 3 cards to graveyard. So whatever is about to happen, like with their top card, is fully random. I have a little bit too much land here. Yeah. 16. I am going to play Bloodstain Mire and then pass the turn. Ooh, no casting of Entomb here. So that I can fetch at end of turn specifically. And then if my opponent gets a creature in play, I can respond slightly differently. Cool. So now we just want something to do with our mana on our turn. The Bone Zone, baby! Yes. Cast Emperor of Bones. Bayou. Go to combat. We're going to go to the Bone Zone now. Archon of Cruelty, please. Adapt. Yeah. And yeah. This is what the people came for. So there's our +1/+1 counters. There's our Archon of Cruelty. Draining our opponent, making them discard a card. We went to the Bone Zone, and it felt great. So Fairy is going to be fantastic in this matchup for the reasons that I was talking about earlier. We have not seen all that many cards from my opponent, so I don't know whether or not they are doing something like Psychic Frog. The Shallow Grave is an uncommon way to do this sort of thing that we've got going on here. I think I am into Pick Your Poison. I think that's going to get rid of large things if they slip through. And I think I like the idea of discard conceptually. So the awkward thing here is some portion of the time I want to board out this removal, and some portion of the time I want it, and it's just fully dependent on how many creatures my opponent is rocking. We saw, I think, 0. I'm gonna try cutting these for this game. I would need 3 more cuts to do my thing from here. It could be some of the green stuff for this matchup. Like, if my opponent is playing primarily unfair, then grinding out with +1/+1 counters becomes less relevant. And for the next game, I may need to board in some number of single target removal spells, depending on how many, like, Douthie Voidwalker or Orcish Bowmaster type things I end up seeing here. This is a fine hand that is slightly awkward because I have the Archon of Cruelty in hand. So sometimes my opponent griefs me and then reanimates my Archon immediately and I die. We're going to hope that doesn't happen. Okay, it did not happen. So, yeah. And I think we're just griefing pitching our Archon. I think that's just the plan. And we are hoping to not see multiple reanimation spells. Well, that's multiple reanimation spells. My opponent has 1 land currently. This is an incredibly awkward hand for me. I have a single reanimation spell, so if my opponent gets a hold of this grief, it's not great. My opponent putting a creature into the graveyard currently might not be the best thing. I have an Animate dead. I think I am taking their Reanimate. That's a toughie, though. I don't think I want to grief a second time. I think that's expending too many resources. We're going to see the Otherworldly Gaze immediately. So we know the exact contents of my opponent's hand as of right now. So this is just selection for them. They have gotten rid of a land and an unmask. It conceptually seems to me like they want a land, so I'm guessing the third card that they were looking at was another land. Now my opponent can animate dead this grief. I mean, you got it, that's happening. I'm going to lose my own animate dead, and then be a bit behind here. Yeah. And I know the exact contents of their hand, so I can just go ahead and do this now. We'll pick up a Bayou. Mortuary? Oh, maybe Mortuary is better. Because I've boarded out a lot of green cards, so this just gives me something to do with my mana in this turn cycle. Bone Zone. Top that. Past turn. I don't think I'm going to get hyper aggressive with my griefs here. I might use grief to get rid of a fatal push to save Emperor of Bones. But I'm like so close to just casting these as reasonable threats. Unmask, target me. You may have one of my griefs for 2 of your cards. So my opponent's last card is Entomb. Oh, I guess Emperor of Bones there. A little awkward, huh? Yeah, that's fine. This can resolve then. Alright, opponent takes a grief. I'll just go ahead and draw my card here. My opponent's remaining card is Entomb. I can force that card out of their hand and then Emperor of Bones away their threat, but their reanimates are still live if I do that. I think instead I am just going to play the Emperor of Bones, Swamp Cycle a Troll, get the other Mortuary, do the oh, nope, fuck. Oh, no, this is turn 3. That's on me. So I could take out Otherworldly Gaze. I think my opponent's just going to cast it anyway. So I am just going to tuck a Troll under Emperor of Bones and be able to swing for 10 points of damage next turn. Yeah, there is the Otherworldly Gaze. Multiple Douthie Voidwalkers in graveyard that I can start eating with Emperor of Bones. My opponent is probably trying to find something more unfair than what is currently happening. All right. I'm not going to cast Grief this turn. I'm going to adapt this. So let's Underground Mortuary and just see if I randomly hit something disgusting. A Reanimate. I would say that qualifies as something disgusting. Let's put that on top. Go to combat. Let's exile my own troll so my opponent can't... I don't know. I kind of want to leave that in there to reanimate. Let's go for a Douthie Voidwalker from my opponent's graveyard then. Let's make this big. All right, choose a creature. We will go with the troll. It kind of feels like Orcish Bowmasters is about to happen. I think I'm just fine with that happening, though. Oh, no. It is just straight up a block. Sure. Pass turn. Sacrifice this troll. It's got a finality counter on it, so it's not going back to exile. Opponent is going for their Entomb. It is an Archon of Cruelty. Sure, that's fine. I think I win the game if my opponent does not find a reanimation effect this turn. And it's pretty bad if they do find a reanimation effect. Alright, well, 2 cards went away there, so something was good enough to keep. It is a Shallow Grave. Seems good. So, what happens to this creature? Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Understood. I am about to take 9 damage, going to 9. Reanimate on something like a troll is still okay. I can reanimate Emperor of Bones. That's actually probably better. Just reanimate Emperor of Bones, immediately adapt it, just to take a bunch of troll damage. Have Grief as a follow-up. That seems fine. Oh fuck, right, the Archon did not attack. Illusion of Choice. Alright, I am at 6. Archon gets exiled. Reanimate Emperor of Bones. My opponent's life total is healthier than it was a minute ago. I don't currently die to my opponent getting a Shallow Grave. So, yeah. Is it Grief instead? Yeah, it's probably Grief instead. So we'll adapt for those +1/+1 counters. Put that Grief into play. Hoo 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 hoo. So Shallow Grave is worth 3 damage because of Douthie Voidwalker. So I will be taking Animate Dead, which is worth more than that. Send in. Can't fetch for the remainder of the game. Emperor of Bones is cool. Alright, that's a land drop. So we're going to go ahead and go to combat. We still get to exile things from our opponent's graveyard. If I target the Otherworldly Gaze, my opponent just casts it. So I'm going to take out the Douthie Voidwalker. And we are going to hold this Bayou back as a bluff. Our opponent's at 12. And then this happens. So we just need to dodge a creature with 4 or greater power. So we're okay to like the Grief and Douthie Voidwalker sized threats. Thoughtseize Bloodstained Mire went to the graveyard, and then our opponent kept the other card. Uh-oh. Not a Surveil land. Are we just getting Entomb reanimated for Atraxa? We are. That's not great. Yeah, so that does kill me. Actually, I'm going to let that resolve and just look at some more cards in my opponent's deck here. Okay, there are Psychic Frogs and the Creation of Avacyn. Search for a card, face down, shuffle. Turn the exiled card face up. If it's a creature, you lose life equal to its mana value. You put the exiled card onto the battlefield if it's a creature card. You don't put it into its owner's hand. Okay, so it's like a slow, self-contained, life-losing reanimation effect. Okay, got it. All right, so I do need to respect Psychic Frog. I now know that. Pick your poison at sorcery speed is looking less and less good. My opponent's hands are not getting disrupted by a single like Inquisition or Thoughtseize effect, unfortunately. That's a little awkward. There are Douthie Voidwalkers over there as well. From the look of it, I don't need to worry about counterspells. Fatal Push seems okay. This is very slow for the matchup. It's real good if it gets into play, but it's slow. It's a little bit of a liability from the other side of the battlefield. I think I'm just going to go up on Fatal Pushes and not die to opposing small creatures. So this is my own Entomb Animate Dead hand. This is fine. My opponent has kept their 6. I'm going to pass the turn. I will end step, pick up either Archon of Cruelty or Atraxa, whichever seems to make more sense. Oh no. Yeah, I mean, if my opponent entombs and reanimates immediately, that beats me. I took Dark Ritual out of this deck. I had it in one of the initial drafts. Alright. Opponent gets their Atraxa. We'll see how bad this is. There's an Unmask that is going to be very good. Alright, so they took Bloodstain Mire, Unmask, Entomb, Animate Dead. Unmask, Junking, a Thoughtseize. So I will respond with an Entomb of my own. So is Atraxa or Archon of Cruelty better? Unsure. So I'm probably going to be getting it with Emperor of Bones, because I'm about to lose Animate Dead. So it's not coming down next turn, it's coming down the following turn. The removal spell might matter. Let's take the called shot on removal spell mattering. All in all, not great though. Oh shit, it's just fucking reanimate. I mean, yeah, I'm going to do that. That was not where I thought we were going. But this being in play long term is hopefully great. Alright, cool. We did not get hit by one of the worst case scenarios here of my opponent's final like unknown card being a large creature that they just discard and then they shallow grave and I die. Given how close I am to death, I don't think I am going to go for a Surveil land. I think I'm just going to dump a basic swamp into play and call it a turn. Like, I can use this Surveil land later on after I have gained an additional 3 life with Archon of Cruelty. My opponent entombing their own Archon and using that as an answer to my Archon is a slightly longer term problem. Seems to be going okay for right now, though. Is there a reason to Emperor of Bones pre-combat? Not realistically, given no creatures in graveyard. I think I'm just going to save my mana and see what happens after this trigger, specifically my card draw side of it. All right, 15. I think I'm just going to play Forest and pass the turn. A little weird. I think I want to hold up Boseiju on Animate Dead for some of the worst case scenarios that can happen. Okay, so Animate Dead resolves. So there's a lot of words here, but there's an intervening if clause if it's on the battlefield. So we will Boseiju this Animate Dead, and then I am hoping to then Emperor of Bones away Archon of Cruelty and win the game. Hot damn. Yeah, so 2 mana, Emperor of Bones, Bayou, exile, this, put it in play, attack with 2 Archon of Cruelties. Bone Zone, baby! Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and honestly, they're just the best at what they do. If you need to keep your deck lists online, this is the way to do it. They have all sorts of different viewing options. You can condense that text if you like things to be tight. You can make them visual grids. You can put them in stacks. You've got all sorts of different ways to kind of view and visualize your deck lists, and they also have some really cool functionality, like allowing you to see playtest hands and even fully playtest your decks. So check them out. Okay, I have a hand of Magic the Gathering cards. It's like very close to good. I almost have like Thoughtseize myself Animate Dead as a curve, but I don't. I can ignore Thoughtseize on turn 1 and no. I think this is just an awkward 6-card hand where we assume that the Archon of Cruelty in the average game has no text. And this is where playing something like Psychic Frog to discard it when I draw it would be perfectly fine and reasonable. I think the plan is Verdant Catacombs, get Swamp, Thoughtseize our opponent, hope to Lucksack into a land. If we don't Lucksack into a land immediately, like we Underground Mortuary and pseudo Time Walk ourselves, it's not a perfect hand, but I don't know that it is bad enough to mulligan with... Ooh. Taking Mox Diamond gives me the most time. Taking Crop Rotation means that I never get wastelanded, which is kind of a big deal, given how this hand is bottlenecked. Taking Mox Diamond is acceleration. I think I'm taking Mox Diamond. The Mox Diamond is the most unfair thing in my opponent's hand, and therefore I think the thing that I want to be stopping here. Fuck. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. So that was about the worst case scenario. I am now just kind of behind in terms of tempo. My opponent's Aether Spellbomb also is going to prevent me from doing something innately unfair with Emperor of Bones. And the multiple Thespian Sages mean that my opponent can set up a persistent Urza's Saga if they would like. Well, I guess we'll start here. See if I randomly mise a creature. It's an Animate Dead. That's just going to graveyard. That has no text right now. We will take a land out of graveyard here. I am okay swinging with my creature. No blocks from my opponent. We're just going to do 2 damage here, I think. 18. Yeah, having 4 reanimation effects at the same time is perhaps not ideal. We are going to keep some sort of Life from the Loam situation from getting out of hand. Yeah, I know. My opponent's long-term goal is to use an Urza Saga that has turned into another land. Sorry. We use a Thespian Sage that has turned into an Urza Saga to generate some tokens, and then ultimately turn it into another land, such as my basic forest, to have something that can just produce an Urza Saga token every turn for the rest of the game. Sure. There's Crop Rotation with the Urza Saga trigger, sacrifice trigger on the stack. Opponent has just plenty of ways to win the game from here. Golgari Lantern, sure, that's a nice safety net for our opponent. So, like, the reanimation stuff is off the table. The fair combat stuff is not going particularly well either. Damn it. Well, I mean, I'll do it. Mortuary? Yeah. Fuck, I'm supposed to do this later. Didn't matter this time, but if I hit a creature, I don't want both to be gotten by this. Alright, so I will go to combat. Point one of these at Generous Ent, one of these at Urza's Saga. Oh shit, my opponent just let me. Okay. Adapt. So this is a 4/4. I get a food token. I will throw 5 damage at my opponent's face here, for a total of 9. Now, I do lose the Generous Ent. That's okay. Now, from here, these construct tokens are going to start outpacing the Emperor of Bones, unfortunately. Maze of Ith is a little rough. That's not bad. Well, it is kind of working against some of my stuff right now, though. That's fine. Is Emperor of Bones a May? Yeah, it is an up to 1. That's fine. So we'll play this, and then I'm just going to choose nothing for Emperor of Bones as of right now to keep this creature larger. Again, though, I think my opponent just has us covered. Alright, it's in play. Not going to exile anything. Not going to exile anything. Last turn. So what I expect to happen sometime in the not too distant future, either immediately or on my opponent's turn, is they are going to turn this Urza Saga into a basic land that is not wastelandable, and then they can start throwing tokens everywhere. Alright, we're just spellbombing that out of play, that's fine. It's kind of everything else that's going on that's not fine. I need to get this Soul Guide Lantern out of play, or alternatively get to 8 mana. Fuck. My opponent could just like block with multiple 3/3s. They have Maze of Ith. I don't have a reasonable turn here, unfortunately. I'm not gonna get rid of anything right now. I could like try to attack in, get my opponent to trade with this Emperor of Bones, reanimate the Emperor of Bones, but my opponent would just let me reanimate the Emperor of Bones, so I'm not exactly in love with that. Alright. We have multiple Forest Thespian stages going on that have these abilities. So this doesn't have counters on it, though, because it's not copying the original Urza's Saga. So that's not going to allow them to make construct tokens. Ugh. I guess we'll surveil land. Nope, we're out of surveil lands. We'll deck thin. That's what we'll call it. That's what the cool kids are calling it. With Maze of Ith and this many bodies here, I don't really know that my attacks make that much sense. I'm just going to pass the turn. Like, I can try to attack with Barrogoyf, trade Barrogoyf for a construct token, but then my defensive options are much worse. I think I should just concede and save myself the time. That's my honest answer. But I have some strings of draws that, like, very much still leave me in this game. So the goal is get my opponent to pop Soul Guide Lantern and then do something cool. If I attack with this Barrogoyf, my opponent can just maze it and not even think about giving up this stuff. They could get rid of it, in which case I try to reanimate, and then I Entomb Reanimate, get Atraxa. Let's go down that route. No removes. Alright, attempt to send in this creature, see how my opponent wants to deal with it. Yeah, alright, they figured it out. Unfortunate. More token friends coming around. That's probably not good. I'm not sure exactly how it's not good, but it's not good. Like, it can just be another Urza Saga. It could be a Dark Depths. Another Maze even is perfectly fine. I think it's a all paths lead to victory situation. Caracas, yeah, sure. So Caracas just hedges against something like an Atraxa getting into play. Cool. Fuck. That's very bad. So now both my large creatures are in hand and are no longer entombable. I think I'm going to concede. I can still try to play towards hard, get to 8 cards in hand, hard discard creatures, but I think the Construct army is just going to overwhelm me by then. Okay. So, Wasteland is fine. Pick your poison is a good way to get rid of Urza Saga or Exploration. Same to this. Probably same to this. I think I have enough main deck Graveyard Hate where I don't need to mess around with this stuff. Thought Seizes are not particularly strong. Those are going to be my first cuts here. Trax is not great versus tutorable Caracas. I still might need 2 large creatures in the deck. What am I doing for these? I can probably trim a land or 2 if I am bringing in 3 Wastelands. And Fatal Push is not exactly at its best. I might still keep one for Elvish Reclaimer or Urza Saga tokens. This doesn't quite do anything. This has Entomb plus Reanimate for an Archon or an Atraxa with something else. I can do Grief to stop something like Initial Graveyard Hate from coming down. I think that is... Ooh, this is a 6-card hand. I get to keep multiple of these. I think I will get rid of Boseiju. Keep Wasteland. We're going to start this on Grief, and I can decide whether or not I want to reanimate a Grief immediately. I do not. So I am probably most interested in taking Crop Rotation here. However, you make mana inefficiently, right? Yeah, you're inefficient color filtering, so I can't take my opponent off of casting Crop Rotation. Yeah, I think I'm getting rid of Crop Rotation to stop Bojuka Bog nonsense. And I think I like doing something unfair. Like getting a... probably Archon of Cruelty here against opposing Urza Saga start. Sounds good. Yeah. So, Madara Uchiha land is gone. Boots are actively good. So, Entomb, I think we are going Archon over Atraxa here. So, Reanimate, target the Archon. This just kind of prevents the Urza Sagas from being meaningful things in the short term. Discarding Life from the Loam. Well, that makes my follow-up play a lot less sexy, but it's still my follow-up play. So, here we are. Last turn. At a minimum, I just have Troll plus Reanimate next turn. Opponent not dredging life from the loam. Archon is good against something like a Maze of Ith, if my opponent randomly finds one of those, but we just kind of have a powerful start. Okay, for this game where I am on the draw, and I don't necessarily get to just power through what my opponent is doing, I can consider something like Null Rod. Null Rod stops Expedition Maps, Spell Bombs, stupid Graveyard Hate tutorable thingy that I'm forgetting the name of right now. The Null Rod effects are like definitely okay in a slower game. I don't think I like it when I'm on the play though. Against Caracas on the draw, maybe let's do this. Get a couple Null Rod effects in there. Sometimes we mise a Mox start and take our opponent off colored mana. So I'm not doing anything innately unfair here. I don't have great early plays. I have ETB tap lands. My lands are wastelandable. I think that's too much going against this hand. This hand just Stone Cold does nothing. We'll go to 5. The 5-card hand is slow. I'm probably keeping the 5-card hand at this point, but I'm not a big fan. So let's go Yaw, and probably put that back in the deck. Keep 3 lands so I can have 2 for Emperor of Bones plus activate, and also do something like Wasteland in early Urza's Saga. Yeah. So Yaw, take out the Urza's Saga. Hopefully that was the strongest thing going on in our opponent's hand, and they don't have another one here. Cool. Okay. No, we can start to make a plan with this. I might even end of turn Surveil land rather than cycle Troll, depending on what happens. Sure. I don't know. I could just like play Emperor of Bones and start chipping away at our opponent's graveyard so a future life from the loam is less scary. What the fuck does this pause mean for my opponent? Like, they went as far as playing Mox Diamond. Okay. Yep. Well, playing Emperor of Bones on our turn. Yeah, that is not great. Yeah, so I need to play Emperor of Bones, eat this land, and then try to start attacking Urza's Saga type stuff. I am going to try to stay on basics for a little while. Let's swamp cycle, pick up another basic, and I can stay on basics for at least 3 turns if I want. That's cool. I think we are just not fucking around with the life from the loam. Like, as much as I want to try to attack some of the stuff that is in play, I think if I leave that life from the loam there, there's too much of a chance of disaster happening. Scariest thing that can happen in the short term is our opponent having access to Dark Depths. Fuck. That's really scary too. That's not great. That makes the Emperor of Bones play. Fuck, stop drawing Archon, man. Yo, why are you fucking doing that? Alright. I am going to actually reanimate Troll rather than trying to throw it with Emperor of Bones. This is a 2/2 if I attack. Would I ever adapt if my opponent blocks? Yeah, I would adapt if my opponent blocks. That's fine. Okay. My opponent takes the damage rather than Maze of Ithing. I'm going to reanimate, targeting the Troll, and pass the turn. Now, I would like my opponent to make a construct token. Fuck, they didn't. So, if I wasteland this, my opponent just makes a copy of it. So, I think I'm going to allow them to tutor, unfortunately. Alright, so they are attempting to Thespian Stage, copy it. So yeah, I will blow that up in response. But my opponent is still going to be able to tutor. But like we saw last game, how easy it is to just get buried. Alright, Soul Guide Lantern. That's fine. Like, we've put a troll in play. I can Boseiju that land. Ooh. I can Boseiju that Dark Depths. Yeah, okay. So, do I ever just race a 2020 if I Boseiju Maze of Ith here? I could deal a maximum of 10 this turn, more realistically 6. And then I deal 10 next turn, a total of 16. That doesn't do it. I need to Boseiju to stop Dark Depths when that happens. Okay. So I'll exile an Urza Saga still. Send in. Yeah. This is only 2 damage, unfortunately. I guess I was going to adapt that, rationalizing that I wasn't going to get a creature out of the graveyard. I missed 2 points of damage. No, I didn't. I decided I needed to hold up Boseiju mana for sorcery speed activate on Dark Depths. Fuck! Come on! Deck, please. I don't need to get rid of anything here. We'll send him on in. Yeah, it's happening. Okay, so here is the copy on Dark Depths. So I can go ahead and let that resolve, let the Dark Depths die, and then Boseiju Thespian stage, and still have this creature be larger. That is fine. Alright. So then this Dark Depths gets blown up. This gets bigger. Edge Maze happens. Maze of Ith happens. Block. No blocks. I'm probably not reanimating something with this, right? Like, I think I'm going to go ahead and just use the mana now. Let's just make a big creature. Deal a little more damage. This dance is not going super well for me, though. Like, my opponent can just, like, Thespian Stage copy Maze of Ith. Fuck. Or that. We worked so hard. You've got your 20/20. We've got to stop drawing both of the fatties at the same time, though. I am at 12 life. This kills me in the air. Opponent does not die to this combat step. Maze of Ith is strunk. GG's. Everyone's favorite play pattern. Grief, reanimate grief. You haven't seen it very much, I'm sure. Oh no. Fuck! I am so ready for Grief and Friends to exit the format. Yeah. And we are not very good at dealing with a resolved Grizzlebrand. So I think we're just gonna, like, concede when my opponent puts a discard spell or whatever on the stack. Yeah, I'm gonna tap out there. So, Fairy good. Inquisition probably good. Pick your poison, probably playable. This will probably be our starting point. Probably go down on some of this Fatal Push type stuff for fairies. Some of the slower value grinding stuff can probably go. That gives us 60 if I don't want to mess around with Wasteland or some of the more fringe effects. Yep. The Emperor of Bones is quite good. I'm hoping to just take a large creature out of my opponent's hand and reanimate it on turn 1, though, if I'm being perfectly honest. Let's grief. Oh, that ice cube was cold. Oh. Show and tell pivot plan. Hello, Grizzlebrand, though. Yeah, this seems like a hello, Grizzlebrand moment. Swamp, reanimate. Target Grizzlebrand. Perfectly healthy play patterns. Alright, you got a turn 1. I got a turn 1. Show and tell pivot plan. Don't think we're gonna mess with that. Don't think I want these. I could keep my curve lower, like get rid of the card advantage. Just keep a threat that I can play on less mana. This is scarier if it's reanimated against me. I think I'm down. This is a little slow for being on the draw, especially if my opponent keeps their 7. These are great cards. These are truly great cards. I am very good if my opponent does show and tell pivot, but I don't have turn 1 black mana. I could forest into Troll to play Emperor of Bones. That's fine. That's turn 2 Graveyard Hate if my opponent has put the creature into graveyard already. But if my opponent discards me, then they can reanimate my Archon, and it's kind of like what happened last time. I think I'm going to try to find a fairy hand. Hey, it's a fairy hand. Keep this, get rid of the Atraxa, and then it's harder. This into this is my curve where I cast my spells every time. So I think we're going to go that route. And we'll See if it works. All right. Douthie Voidwalker, you've got it. The Thoughtseize afterwards, that gets to take my Emperor of Bones. I think this game's over. Being on the draw, confirmed rough. Yep. The Emperor has perished. It's probably fine to just do this. Play Inquisition. Reanimate and Show and Tell. Reanimate's not very strong right now. I think I'm going to take the Show and Tell. So, Douthie Voidwalker has shut off my graveyard as a reasonable resource. So I think I will leave my opponent with the Reanimate, rationalizing that it is possible for me to shut off that card in terms of life total. The Show and Tell is not particularly strong. Neither is the Reanimate. Like, I have the Fairy here, so if my opponent goes for the Reanimate, like, I will just use the Fairy, and that's fine. Yeah. Alright, so Junk Grizzlebrand, the other card doesn't really matter. I'll send the Show and Tell to exile. This just means that I am not casting the Fairy next turn. Fairy wasn't racing Douthie Voidwalker anyway. So the surveilling can be slightly awkward with the Douthie Voidwalker around. We'll risk that. Fuck! This is exactly what I was just talking about. I don't want to draw that card. Maybe my opponent won't notice. Alright, well. Cast. I have a 2/2. Land drop. They noticed. Yeah. Wait. Oh, okay. There it goes. And then reanimate on the Douthie Voidwalker. Sure. Just the wrong timing for me. At this point, I think I can go ahead and concede. GG's. Entomb Reanimate. Or sorry, Entomb Animate Dead. Yeah, this is like totally fine and good. And we have some mid-rangey stuff we can do afterwards if we start walking into some counter spells or something like that. Generous and has an absolutely massive booty. We can maybe even block a Psychic Frog. Maybe, I mean, like, let's not get our hopes up or anything, but, like, it might happen. I am not sure how I am playing the next turn cycle. It kind of feels like sandbagging the Animate Dead is a good thing to do. White? Cephalid Breakfast style thing? Sure. Stoneforge Mystic is going to resolve. I am probably going to attempt to Fatal Push it, but I am going to Fatal Push it after using Entomb as bait for a Daze. Or bait for a Force of Will. Nice. Yeah, that's fine. So now we are going to play around Daze and Fatal Push Stoneforge Mystic. And then I can just use some mana to cycle, and then we'll start going the Bristly Bill mid-range route for a little while before animating a troll. Yeah, that's fine. I actually want to cycle this one here if I want to have the possibility of being Bristly next turn. Yeah. Please don't play another Stoneforge. Nice. Okay. Next land drop. Would I like to animate dead the Generous Ent? Bristly Bill is better if I landfall immediately? Yeah. I don't know, animate dead on the 6/5 is better than on the 5/7. I don't know, I would rather this eat a Swords to Plowshares than a larger creature. This is fine. Like, I'll just give my opponent a Swords to Plowshares target. They don't fire it off. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have it, but they did not fire one off immediately. Or even think about it, for that matter. Alright, Bayou. Get Swole. Go to Punchies. Attempt Punchies. Swords to Plowshares. Fucking do it! Yes. So then the next question becomes, am I playing around Daze? Opponent does not have proactive cards. Opponent does not have cards like Ponder. Daze makes sense as something they could have drawn in the last turn cycle or so. They probably didn't have Daze when they Force of Willed. Oh, this is turn 4. Oh, but I did Bayou this turn. Oh, Wasteland was involved. Okay. Daze is possible. Spell Pierce is possible. Something weird, like a Flex slot blue counterspell that you might see in a CEDH deck is possible. I think I just animate dead a Generous Ent to play around Daze, even though it is the, like, absolutely worst threat. Let's get our food. Pass turn. That's fine. Opponent likes their card. We'll swamp cycle end of turn. A surveil land is probably actively good. Well, let's go to combat. Do a small punchy. Our opponent goes to 14. Let's animate dead on troll around Daze. I could surveil land first, actually. Just on the off chance that I hit a major creature. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are starting to be hard castable. I'm just going to send that to graveyard. Just have more fuel there. Animate dead on a troll. In play. Pass turn. Probably don't cycle this troll for a land. Unless I get wastelanded, in which case I'll pick up another underground mortuary. We have to start thinking about Terminus as a thing that can be a little annoying. In this slower, grindy match, the green cards that do things with +1/+1 counters are going to be kind of cool. And we are at enough mana that an Emperor of Bones can immediately be strong. Psychic Frog. Sure. We got that big booty Ent, though. Nobody's getting through that shit. Nobody. 3-turn clock with my troll. Force of Plowshares is pretty good for my opponent right now. I think I am not cycling troll at this time. Although the troll might just get dazed. I haven't given my opponent great dazed targets in a couple of turns. Tamiyo, sure. You've got it. This is going to be a surveil land. Do I want to attack for 9? And let my opponent draw a card with their Psychic Frog. The thing about 9 is that 9 plus 5 is 14. Which is my opponent's life total. But this attack just kills Tamiyo. So I am letting my opponent trade Tamiyo for a different card if I make this attack. Takes an entire turn off the clock. What the fuck just happened to my... Oh, I just clicked through my fucking combat step. Cool. Strunk. That is probably a game-losing mistake. That's frustrating. We'll live with it. Yeah. Batterskull is a very good top deck there, though. Alright, let's figure something out. Reanimate. So there's a Stoneforge Mystic. I have a troll that I can reanimate. I also have a troll that I can hardcast. My opponent can also block a troll now by throwing everything in front of it. Not great. Reanimate represents multiple turns of troll in a row. That's fine. I think I'm going to junk that, though. I think I have some long-term problems that I need to figure out. Or not. Alright, so what happens if I attack with troll? My opponent can triple block, in which case I deal 5 damage and do not succeed in killing 2 creatures. That's not great. So instead, while we can hard cast it, let's cast another troll and try to have better attacks next turn. Batterskull going on Psychic Frog long term is a pretty big deal. Batterskull on Tamiyo for a 7 toughness Tamiyo, sure. I mean, we can bounce here. My opponent gets a clue, which is nice long-term value. Bristly Bill, sure. So my trolls can now attack. I can deal 11 damage to my opponent directly. My opponent does not have 3 blockers. Yeah. We'll send those in. My opponent goes to 7. Bristly Bill is my bait spell, just in case my opponent's 2 cards are Force of Will blue card. And then I animate dead on a troll yet again. So my opponent is effectively at 11-ish life. I have that much easily. I think I win the game through the Batterskull if I don't make that accidental click through combat earlier. Let's see if we can recover. Yep. So we bounce. This is fine. Air quotes fine, maybe. Now another creature means that the Tamiyo Batterskull situation can block. That's when things start getting bad. If my opponent draws 1 more card, their Tamiyo has to flip. The way this is templated is that this is not a May, so my opponent cracking this other clue would probably be very favorable for me. Yeah, so they don't do it. Now, in my opponent's 3 cards, do they have an Orcish Bowmaster? If they do, they can block a 6 power troll, meaning that 10-ish damage gets through. I probably don't attack with extra creatures other than the trolls, because then that just allows normal Tamiyo blocks. Fuck. Yeah. Alright. I mean, we gotta try it. Alright, so we do not succeed in killing the Tamiyo here. However, we do get to kill 2 other creatures. And killing the additional creatures absolutely matters for this Archon resolving in a little bit. No +1/+1 counters to get Bristly Bill going. The cool thing here is that, like, from my opponent's perspective, Wasteland Enemy doesn't really make sense, because they have Batterskull that they are going to want to equip, whereas, like, this Archon of Cruelty is one of my long-term outs to their bullshit. A new Psychic Frog, yep. So 3 creatures, trolls can't attack. Thoughtseize is not good. I need more mana. Land drops would also be fine. I will Thoughtseize my opponent. Like, I will still use my mana. Sure. Bowmaster is a little annoying. Marking some damage on a troll. Ooh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. I am going to take that Cauldra. That is just a real problem card if this game goes on. My attacks aren't great. I'll pass the turn. Sure. Like, in good news, we're not losing to Psychic Frog. In bad news, well, you know. Alright, our opponent investigates. We do the same thing. We bounce in combat again. Opponent goes up to 13. Alright, there's cracking a clue, which transforms the Tamiyo. That's fine. Like, I very much care about that Batterskull being unequipped right now. That matters a lot. So the Tamiyo pluses. The Tamiyo next turn, if I don't kill the Tamiyo, threatens to get back Swords to Plowshares, which removes the Ent, which is not great for me. A Nethergoyf is a large body right now. Sure. Fatal Push. That's a hell of a tempo play on a Batterskull. So I think we're going to kill this Tamiyo. Now, my creatures are going to get slightly smaller. This is fine. We are going to do this. Now, I think I can't use the Fatal Push here. I think I just accept that I am trading this creature for Orcish Bowmaster's token and Tamiyo, and I am okay with that. Yep. And then I'll pass turn. And then the hope is that my opponent gets greedy and equips Batterskull to Nethergoyf. Yep. Do I let that go to combat and attack? Like, will I trade Bristly Bill for Nethergoyf right now? No. No, I don't think I will. Fuck. Alright, that's real good. Yeah, never getting a landfall for Bristly Bill, never getting additional mana for Archon. That's putting me in a rough spot. I'm going to take this crack for 9. Well, I mean, this gives me the possibility of an Atraxa. I am just realizing how much time I am down on clock, though. I think I'm just going to tap out here and preserve my clock for if I have to play 2 more games. I fully punted that game. That's on me. This is a way to get rid of Cauldra, and then we want things that get rid of small creatures. I probably can get away with not playing the Thoughtseizes. The Thoughtseizes are best for Stoneforge Mystic if I am boarding in 5 things that make me better versus Stoneforge Mystic. This seems fine. The grindy stuff is going to be fine here. Generous Ent, surprisingly good. I don't really know what to get rid of as my last card. I almost want it to be a Grief. Grief's not the best versus Swords to Plowshares in particular. You don't get to bring it back again later. It could be an Emperor of Bones. I don't know, Emperor of Bones is a pretty stressful thing for my opponent, and their graveyard does matter. Could be an Entomb. Yeah. This is fine. I could also have boarded in the other Boseiju for Batterskull specifically. It's not great versus Cauldra. Alright, land and pass. My curve might not, like, go 100% perfectly here, in that, like, my opponent is very unlikely to play a turn 1 creature here. There's Tamiyo, which could allow me to just instantly Fatal Push. So we'll probably just pick up another basic here. Just play this game on basics for a little while. Just not open that up as an angle that matters. I don't think I want to represent this as a surveil land immediately. If we are just trying to put in a threat, although this eats swords to plowshares a relatively large portion of the time. That's the sort of card that my opponent is very, very much going to want to have in their opening hand. Yeah. Cycling creature. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, let's do that. Cast Entomb. Atraxa probably in this position. Cast Reanimate on Atraxa. I don't think this is going to resolve. Okay. Opponent is digging for an answer. 3 looks is a lot of looks. There's at least Force of Will, maybe Force of Negation, maybe Surgical Extraction. Oh shit, we get away with murder. So, land, creature, value creature. I don't have another creature in graveyard for Emperor of Bones though, so let's go land, creature, instant, and then one of these 3. My life total is 12 currently. I think I'm just going to take a Pick Your Poison as sorcery. So my opponent's going to send my stuff to exile anyway. So let's click done. I've made my land drop. I have 3 Fatal Pushes available. Stormforge Mystic, you ain't shit. Barrogoyf is a 3/4 as of right now. Now, opponent could randomly have a Karakas in their mana base. We dodged that bullet. Fairy would obviously be good. Okay, yep, no, my opponent gets to swords. I have a follow-up threat. I have a bunch of value. I can play a Fatal Push immediately. If my opponent deploys a creature, I don't have to worry about days. Okay, seems like my opponent is going for a creature. It is a Psychic Frog. We are going to push the hell out of that frog. Alright. No ability to fight back. Now, if I draw a reanimation effect, I can reanimate a Psychic Frog. Okay, if I draw a reanimation effect, we're in business. We are going to attempt a threat here. We'll do it with around days, and then I have end of turn surveil land for a little bit of value and potentially even growing this creature more. I would probably not end of turn Fatal Push something right now. I can just Fatal Push twice on my own turn if I need to. Stop it! Yes. So I'm not going to Fatal Push here. I don't want to Brainstorm from my opponent to potentially transform that Planeswalker, like around my removal spell. So we'll just do this. I'm looking for another threat or a reanimation spell. Yep. Put on top. So let's start here and just see if this happens. Fantastic. So we will Entomb. I think just getting the other big creature and casting Animate Dead on the Archon. Opponent has 2 cards. They could answer this. They didn't this time. I am okay trying to use the Fatal Push as a potential bait spell and giving up that degree of value. This is fine. This is going to result in my opponent being hellbent while I get an additional card. Cool. All right, so we've got a threat for next turn. I have 2 removal spells queued up. My opponent's top decking. I believe that I am favored in this current position. Land is totally fine and good, given that I have a Bristly Bill. So we'll take that counter, and then I will end of turn surveil, get another counter for Bristly Bill, and then I can just start doubling counters with my mana if my opponent is not presenting answers to this card. And they have used a ton of copies of Swords to Plowshares. Like, they have used all of their copies of Swords to Plowshares, sure. So at some point, I am realistically going to exhaust their removal. I wonder if it's correct to cycle that Lorien Revealed versus try to hold it for a few turns to refuel. That is a legitimate question. I am not sure the answer to that question. Let's surveil. Reef. I am fine just playing that as a 3/2 attacker. Like, that's fine. it doesn't always have to be the like awesome value body that we often see it being. Just 3/2 menace is perfectly fine stats when my opponent is at 14 life and I have 2 removal spells to back up what I am doing. Yeah, that's a little annoying. I will just let it hit me though. Emperor of Bones. Yeah. Do I just want to exile that forever? Just fatal push it out of the way. Emperor of Bones it. Get in for a decent amount of damage. Yeah, that's fine. That was not the plan, but it's fine. Alright, so Junk Nethergoyf with this trigger. Okay, yeah, there we go. Alright, yeah, so we just fully exhausted my opponent's resources here. This Boseiju probably should have come in for the last game. Batterskull's a problem. If I get rid of one more Entomb, having these in the deck starts to look less good if I do that though. Yeah. I'll just pull a Swamp. And that's probably fine. I don't love the second Entomb here, but everything else about this hand is pretty good, and I am perfectly willing to keep that. I don't want my opponent to play a Tamiyo on turn 1 with this hand. I want them to just, like, ponder. Thank you. Good. And that was a very fast shuffle. We'll just go ahead and pass the turn here. The immediate Entomb is a little weird on my end. I might not get the most Emperor of Bones value. Let's fetch. I will get basics. I can play the game on basics perfectly fine here. It will do the Entomb. Not sure if it's going to resolve. It does. I think I want the possibility of pulling an Atraxa out of graveyard for value. Hey, that's reasonable. I, in theory, want to play this Emperor of Bones later on in the match, rather than immediately. I don't want to Abrupt Decay this now. This is better when I play it with a fetch land. Let's Emperor of Bones, but not remove my Atraxa. Let's Emperor of Bones and remove like a Polluted Delta or a Lorien Revealed from my opponent's graveyard. Ooh, shit. Sure. Happy with that trade. Unlicensed Hearse. Sure. That's fine. Makes this less good. I could just Abrupt Decay this immediately and let my opponent eat Atraxa Emperor of Bones. And then, like, do mid-range stuff with this. I think I like that. And this is uncounterable, so it's happening. Do your eating. Yep. Then we'll go Swamp and pass. Do an end of turn Entomb, which puts a new creature into the graveyard. And then I probably drop this. Sometimes I'll Bristly Bill, though. Yep. I am just going to yield until end of turn. Alright, opponent really tanked with that Ponder before keeping a card. We'll see what they're doing. It is a Stoneforge Mystic, which is not great for me. Getting Kaldra. Kaldra is very threatening here. I'm going to take 4 damage. And then at end step, I will Entomb for Archon of Cruelty. You just have that in the graveyard as a way to fight back against this stuff. So this, unfortunately, does not answer a Kaldra. We're going to block our opponent real quick. I think I want to be able to Bristly Bill fetch. I think I'm going to play this as a land, so I'm playing around Daze, and drop this 5/6 creature, which will be attacking as a 7 power lifelinking creature next turn. So as long as this stays in play, this can't attack. The Kaldra still can. Swords to Plowshares effects are very good right now, though. Must be like a prismatic ending. My opponent's having trouble paying for something. It is a prismatic ending. That is resolving. This gives me another turn to answer the Kaldra. However, my life total is quickly decreasing, meaning that Reanimate is not as good as it normally would be. Like we are below 8 right now for Reanimate. Not ideal. So I will Bristly Bill. Kaldra's attacking in for 5. I have to block Nethergoyf. So Bristly Bill is blocking Nethergoyf. So put a +1/+1 counter here. I think at this point I just have to get a little lucky. Like, this is past the point where I should win. Oh, man. I'm dead. That doesn't even gain me life. Now my opponent just activates Kaldra, swings in with another Goyf. Yep. I am unfortunately dead. And we put up a 2-3 finish. Alright, so how do we feel about Emperor of Bones? This card seems really sweet. This was just something I cooked up over the lunch hour. This wasn't super well thought out. We did not live the dream of Emperor of Bones plus Bristly Bill to, go and return a very large number of creatures or return creatures repeatedly. But the mid-rangey stuff that we had going on here was perfectly fine. This is something that I would really like to explore after Grief leaves the format, as weird as that sounds. While Grief is something awesome to bring back from the graveyard, it also just makes games go so quickly. And I think if games slow down and mid-range card advantage engines start looking better and better and better, this is something that I would really like to see, like slotting this into something along the lines of a Cradle Control or Rock style deck list. I think it's very good. And there's a lot of new Modern Horizons stuff that makes it like good to be in green black. Springheart Nantuko was something that was in the deck of this video even. And like doing that sort of stuff with this, maybe even you don't do the reanimation Entomb stuff. Like maybe you just play a whole bunch of these as fair cards. Like maybe that's just fine. So I don't think I nailed it with the deck building here. I think I was on the right track. I think this is something really cool to keep exploring. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm sad that I never drew Innkeeper's Talent. This is something I think that has been making some waves in younger formats. And so like I thought this card had some real potential. Giving ward to your Grief or your Archon of Cruelty or whatever is kind of cool. So generally speaking, I'm going to give myself a thumbs up for the general theory of the deck list. I'm going to give some of the details a thumbs down. It doesn't quite feel polished enough. Some of the numbers are still off. I'm not exactly sure how they're off. I only really played 4 rounds since our opponent just conceded with this, so I don't have the same degree of data that I normally have. So I'm just like not sure, like, do I need more removal? How is the land count? Do I need more copies of Generous Ent? Like, should this be more green than it is? If it's more green than it is, then I can start playing things like Force of Vigor in the sideboard. Like, there's some of this stuff that I just don't have a good read on after this number of rounds. But I would love to hear your comments down below. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. If you need some cards, consider checking out my sponsor and using promo code ThrabenU to let them know that I sent you. All right, you go to the Bone Zone. I hope you have fun. See ya!